One thing I really want to highlight, man, is I think the fear that has been instilled in us as a society around individuals who've been to prison, that fear has to we have to get rid of that fear. And I'm hoping that the little work that I do, this little bitty work I do with Pardon Me is and speaking across the country, um, can really help to drive that conversation and to drive the fact that we can create change. And if there was one piece of advice that leave for folks as we wrap up is if you come in contact, even at your job, if it's your family member, don't pass judgment on somebody. Have a conversation, be an influence. One of the hardest things for people that have been to prison to do is to talk about being in prison because they're instantly going to be judged and they're instantly going to be put into this bucket of the worst people in the world. Like there are people that I know that refer to themselves as pieces of shit because they've been to prison. And I have to tell them that's false. But that's the mentality that they're getting when they come out of prison, or that's the mentality of what they feel. And they really feel like that. And what you say and how you feel is who you become. So for those of you out there listening to the show, those that rock with us at Pardon Me, let's take time out. Let's take a second. Let's give some grace to individuals who've made mistakes. Let's give some grace to individuals who are trying to change their lives and put themselves in a better position so they don't create any more victims. That's
Welcome to the Pardon Me podcast, the show where we explore the stories that inspire, challenge, and connect us. Today, I'm your host, Cam Beats, and today's episode is one that you won't want to miss. 20 years ago, our guests took their first steps into freedom after a life-altering period of incarceration. The journey since then has been one of resilience, redemption, and reflection. Today, we're honored to have them on our show to share their story, the lessons learned, the hurdles they overcame, and the vision for the future filled with purpose. We'll dive into what those first days of freedom felt like and how they rebuilt their life, and the wisdom they've gained over 2 decades of transformation. It's a conversation about second chances, the power of perseverance, and the human spirit capacity to grow. So I want to welcome you to today's show and welcome the actual host of Pardon Me, but today a special guest of Pardon Me, Joshua Johnson.
Yo, what's up, Cam Beats? How you doing?
You got me switching roles on here.
I know, man. You know, this takes us back to our first show about 2 years ago when you interviewed me for the first time when we did the kickoff show for the inaugural. Make sure anybody listening, make sure you go check out episode 1. But yeah, man, I think this is a perfect opportunity to switch roles and for me to get behind the mic on the other side and allow you to hit me with some questions for this special show.
Right. So this commemorates your 20th year of freedom, correct?
Yes, sir. 20 years ago today.
Wow. Congratulations.
December 7th.
Wow.
I believe it was 9 a.m. in the morning. I walked out of Winnebago Correctional Facility.
Crazy.
Never stepped foot back as a resident of the Wisconsin Department of Corrections.
You're putting that very, very politely, a resident, but we all know.
No doubt, man.
Well, we appreciate this opportunity, and like I said, 20 years is a long time. It doesn't seem like a long time, but it's definitely a long time. And I know you've got a lot to talk about. Actually, you've kind of got a new residence and a new space that you're staying in at this point. We're gonna get to that when we talk more into the interview. But I also want to actually add to the platform one of the people that is behind the scenes that typically is never on camera, but we want to have him be a special co-host as well. I'm not going to call him by the name that we call him. We're going to call him by the name that y'all call him. He is Poindexter, the Pod Father. How you doing, sir?
Pretty good, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. How's everything going?
Everything's wonderful. Wonderful. You know, we're here to celebrate and give this man his flowers and bring back Pardon Me. It's been a minute since we've done this, though. It's been a minute.
Man, it's been a long minute, man. I mean, now I live down in Charlotte, so I'm not there personally with y'all to be in the studio, but it's definitely been a minute, man. We took some time off, really to think about the brand and think about how we wanted to continue to tell the stories. We have a great year coming up here, 2025. Got some great shows lined up. where individuals are going to come on and share their story. Whether it's thinking about whether gubernatorial or presidential pardons, but then also we want to do a little twist in 2025. We want to start getting into some advocacy and bring some folks on the show that really, really have been doing some great work in the community and advocate for them and others like them to get an opportunity to get a pardon when they may not be eligible for a pardon for years and years to come. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in 2025. Really excited to have those conversations, to put those shows together. But yeah, definitely shout out to Poindexter. Poindexter's the man, the myth, the legend, the podfather behind the work that we do, that we've done so far, just on the Pardon Me podcast, but then also many of the other podcasts that he's a part of.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And just to let you know that this would not be possible if it wasn't for your story. So
Absolutely. Before we get started, aren't you sipping on some a special concoction over there, sir, down in Charlotte?
Man, you already know what I'm sipping on down here. Be Clear Water, proud sponsor of the Pardon Me podcast and the Pardon Me brand.
You all know and love our premier alkaline water that's wrapped in sustainable packaging. Well, welcome the new kids on the block. Our watermelon mint and elderberry lemonade are packed with vitamins. It's great tasting and refreshing without the artificial flavors and colors. Life's confusing enough. Let's be clear.
I wish I was lying when I said when I drink it, it tastes good as hell. But cold out that can is ridiculous. It is so delicious. It's one of the more refreshing waters you can get.
Man, this water is like from the heavens, my brother. Ooh, it's so good. Shout out to Marty. Shout out to Marty for all the great work he's doing.
hey, let Marty know I need some from my my soda machine.
Man, Marty, listen to the podcast. We heard you.
I will pay for it. I'm not asking for free, but you know.
I was gonna say, no, my brother, you're gonna have to get your own. So as we actually go into this, because we're going to get going on the interview and whatnot, let's talk about like reflecting back on the past. Like, what was one of the most significant moments during your incarceration that motivated you to kind of change your life?
It's when I first went to the parole board. It was crazy because they told me, my attorney was like, "Oh, don't worry, just do 5 years, good behavior, you'll get out of prison, and you won't have any problem. You know, you're young. You know, they tell you any little thing you want to hear. You know, I'm 18 years old at the time. So I did my 5 years, went in front of the parole board. Parole board read off all these different things. My conduct report, which was very low. They read off the fact that, that I got kicked out of school at one time while I was in prison. And basically they said, we're going to give you a 36-month defer. Now, 36 months is 3 years. So now I'm already at 5 years. Now this puts me at 3 years, puts me at 8 years. The mandatory release date is 13 years, 4 months on a 20-year prison sentence. So now I can do the math. And I'm like, wait a minute, 8 years, 13 years. After 8 years, I'm going to be pushed down. I'm probably going to get a 24, and then I'm going to move all the way down, right? So I'm going to be close to that 13 years. So as I walked back to the unit, and it was tough, man. I was embarrassed. I was ashamed because when I was walking up there, everybody's high-fiving. They're like, all right, man, good luck. I've been there for a couple of years. So everybody, we all know who each other are. They big up at me, and I walk back, with the look of shame, like, man, I can't believe it, like disappointed. And when people were asking me, I told them, I was forthright about it. I got back to my room, and I remember just sitting on a bunk and just like staring at the ceiling, wondering what's next. And I think this right here is the most significant moment in all of my, 20 plus years of being system impacted, because I had two choices to make. One, I could just say, man, forget what they're talking about. I'm going to do mandatory release anyways. So it just is what it is. I'm going to continue to do the behavior that I have. I'm not going to worry about it. Or two, I'm going to start to prepare myself because eventually they have to let me go. And even if it isn't when I want to go home, I want to be ready when it's time to go home. And obviously I chose that. That method for me worked out best. And I immersed myself. I got myself involved in all the schooling possible. I started volunteering. I became part of the youth awareness program, talking to youth within the area about, not making mistakes. I became the head baker. So I used to be the head baker for an institution of 2,000 men. I started driving the trams, like the golf carts. I used to drive the guards around in the golf carts around the institution. So I made that choice because for me, I knew that eventually I was going to go home and I wanted to be prepared for that. So to me, that's the most significant moment from the day I got arrested in 1995 to till today, right?
Mhm.
In 2024. That was the most significant because if I would have chose the other way, who knows? I may have done that full 13 years and just who knows what would have happened. But to me,
This is
that was significant.
I'm sorry, but that's a slight tweak in your understanding, your perspective on actually being incarcerated, because you can either be in there counting the days, like you said, looking at the ceiling, counting the days and thinking negatively, or just living the life and adjusting to the lifestyle there and actually making the most of it, which is easier said than done. And when it sounds like you did, and almost like you created a lifestyle within the system that helps you tolerate the time. But once you were released, what was the hardest part about changing that and adjusting to the life after being released? Because that's significantly a change too.
Man, look, getting out of prison, I tell people this all the time. In prison, that's not real life. Getting out of prison is real life. And what I mean by that is while you're in prison, everything for your meals, your clothes, the heat, the water, lights, everything's provided for while you're in prison. That's not real life. You're in there and somebody's taking care of you. When you get out, now Mr. Bills start coming. Mr. Bills, plural, start coming. Life comes. You have to start taking care of things. You have to start, you have to be a grown-up. When I went in at 17, I was living in my parents' house. I come out at 27. Now the expectation is that I'm a grown man, being 27 years old. I'm grown, but I was actually not. I was stunted. I was still 17 years old in my mind because that's when I went to prison.
And you're still dependent.
Yeah, my growth stopped, right? My
Mhm.
growth stopped. My mental growth may have, physically I continue to grow, but my mental growth of being a free person stopped at the age of 17.
Mhm.
Yes, I read books. Yes, I watched, whatever I could, documentaries or TV. I prepared myself. But the hardest part, man, getting out and living life, that is the absolute hardest part. I tell people that all the time. Life starts the day you get released. It doesn't start while you're in there. That's easy
Mhm.
time. I mean, it's not easy time, relevant to. I know I'm speaking to you all like I'm speaking to somebody else that's been to prison, but that's everything is being taken care of for you in there.
So you talked about significant change inside and how your life changed when you got out. Like, what was the most important thing in that bookend of time that you learned about yourself? Like, I appreciate your perspective on how you talked about how you changed your perspective on being incarcerated, but then learning that you were dependent on something to actually survive. But then what did you learn about yourself after you kind of came to those conclusions?
Yeah, well, I think for me, one of the biggest things I learned about myself and just about life in general is like not everybody's along for the ride. Not everybody you come in contact with, not everybody you break bread with or have conversation with is along for the ride.
Mhm.
And going into prison as a teenager, your mind is to fit in because you want to fit into the culture of what's going on, right? You want to make sure that you're a part of the culture so you don't become a victim of the culture or so you don't, you want to feel accepted. And for me, I think one of the biggest things I learned was that it's okay to be me. It's okay to be who I am. It's okay to laugh at myself, right? It's okay to take, the things that I come across and not take them personal. That's
Mhm.
crazy because, how do you do that when you've spent 10 years in prison? But for me, it's more about this is just who I am, and it's either you take it or leave it. Now, I know that I'm not a horrible person. So if I was a horrible person, then people could break that down and be like, you can't tell people to do this, that, or the other. But for me, I know I'm not a horrible person. So if I'm doing everything I can and you're really not on board for that, then I can easily just detract from, I can detach and keep it moving. So for me, one of the biggest things I learned about myself was not take myself serious, but to really
Mhm.
be focused and not try to please and impress everybody. And that was hard. When you go in, that's the first thing you try to do.
Question for you. So I know we've kind of talked, and we even went to the point of where you got out of jail. I've come across a lot of brothers and sisters that have done time as you have. And a lot of them always say, I'm not going back. And they go back. What happened, or what was the point where when you said, I'm not going back, and that was reality, and that was like, what did you do to ensure that that wasn't going to happen?
Man, that's a great question, Poindexter. So for me, it actually happened shortly after that parole. When the first question I answered about when I went to the parole board, shortly after that, I remember this. I remember this like it was yesterday, man. Some of these things are just, when somebody asks me, it's just so vivid. I stood in the mirror, and if you're in prison, you know that there is no real glass mirror. It's basically a piece of stainless steel that's polished, but it's a mirror, right? And I remember staring in that mirror, and I said to myself with tears in my eyes, I'm never coming back. Like I stared at that. I stared at myself and said, I'm never coming back. And I think it was from that moment for me that there was such disappointment after I went to parole, to see the parole board, to see that I was treated based on what I did. And for me, I said, I don't ever want to give anybody that power over me again. Never. I don't ever want to give somebody the power to determine my freedom, to determine my life or death over me again. So I'm never coming back. So it was just a conviction at that point for me. And it's just continued to be a conviction for me since that day. I'm just like, man, I'm never going back to prison. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not going to put myself in a situation to even remotely get close to going back to prison. But it was just that conviction that I had for myself.
So since you made that identified that and had that kind of conversation with yourself, was that they call like metacognitive? I don't know if that's metacognitive or not, but anyway, you saw yourself and you talked to yourself in the mirror. After that, when you were released, did you attach yourself to somebody that helps you, like guide you in that transformation after you're released? Like, because not going back is one thing and telling yourself, but then coming back out and hanging with people who are going to go back, that's usually the case.
Yeah, so it's interesting, man. While we're in prison, we're taught when you get out, like these are just people that are here for the day, right? These are individuals who are helping you get through this process. But when you get out, you need to find those mentors. You need to find individuals, that are going to help guide you. So I'm going to tell you two quick stories about this. Number one of the challenges that I faced, I'm on my third marriage. Why am I on my third marriage? People will say, right? You're broken. You're on your third marriage. But actually, I identified what the issue really is. And the issue for me was, while I was in prison, I was being taught to be a man by men who were in prison. And those men who were in prison looked at me as impressionable and wanted to teach me how to be a man when I got out. So what they would say to me is, say, young blood, or yo, young Jay, what you need to do when you get out, you got to get a house, you got to get a wife, and you got to get that picket fence. That's the dream you got to chase. Then have you a couple kids, and then you'll never come back. So this mentality became embedded in me that was the only way I was never going to come back. What I quickly realized, I won't say quickly, it took me some years. What I quickly realized was that's actually not what doesn't bring you back to prison. Your choices don't bring you back to prison. But for me, I also heard from those same men, don't hang around people that have been to prison when you get out. And actually, the system tells you that too. Like it's punitive if you're hanging around individuals who've served time, who've been to prison. But what I found, Canned, which is very, very interesting, if you pick the right individuals to hang around that have been to prison, neither one of y'all going back to prison. And that's what I did. I found individuals who were positive. The Bryant Wilcoxes, that's the homie. He owns over on 55th and Lisbon, BattleBox videos, right? Video games. My buddy Robert Williams, they call him Booby, right? I attached myself to individuals like that who were being successful after they got out of prison. And success to me was they weren't getting in any trouble. And what I did is I was able to now have individuals to talk to and to get through this process with. Because talking to individuals who haven't been to prison was tough because they're not there. They can't meet you where you are. So, for me, finding those individuals to engage with that are being positive, that are doing good things, getting engaged in the community, which I started to find groups that were getting engaged in the community. That was key for me to keep me focused. And I think honestly, man, a lot of times when people get out of prison, there's a lot of people walking among us that you would never know they've been to prison because they're ashamed or embarrassed, or they just don't want to talk about that part of their life anymore because they've moved on. But to be honest, for me, it's therapy. Like every time I talk about it, it's therapy for me. It makes spending those 10 years in prison feel that much more valuable if I'm able to share my story and if I'm able to help individuals not end up in that same boat.
So it's almost like you attach yourself to a sponsor like Alcoholics Anonymous, where they have an individual that has gone through the same thing that you have, but help support you through, not in the same capacity, but you attach yourself to people who are kind of, I guess, like-minded, like being that you've lived that life, but yet are like-minded, thinking that you're not going back.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? Like there's so many individuals who, when they get out of prison, and the reason they tell you that, let's be real here, the reason they tell you shouldn't hang around individuals who've been in prison, because most individuals, let's just keep it real here, most individuals release and they go back to the same communities they came from. And that's problematic, but that's also systemic. It's built that way, right? If you let somebody out and tell them to go be successful, that's one less person you got to worry about coming back in, which means less dollars coming into the pocket of the organization, the state, whatever. So what happens is individuals get released those communities, and they go back to those communities with a renewed, sense of purpose, and they go back to the communities with this ideology of, I'm going to be successful and I don't want to go back to prison. But the moment they hit a roadblock, they go back to their old behaviors. But for me, I didn't come from that. I was a high school kid. I was a jock. I really was never in trouble with the law. I played football, baseball, I wrestled, right? I was the jokester. So I never really was that person to leave a community that I was going back to to go back into. So for me, it was more about, how do I find individuals I could continue to grow with?
Were there any challenges you faced when you were kind of going through this process? Like, I guess rebuilding your life is another thing, but you're basically kind of starting over. What kind of challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge I faced was the understanding that my mind frame was still 17 years old. And I remember getting out and going to the mall to go buy some clothes. And I was like, man, where the silk shirts at? I went to prison in 95, right? That was the thing, right? Like, man, I was rocking the silk shirts to school, man. I had the one without the collar. I had every color,
You're stuck in time. You're stuck in time.
I was stuck in time, right? So I was like,
came out looking like New Edition.
But I was stuck in that moment, like when you were in high school, everything had to match, right? The color in your shirt matched the color on your shoes, right? Exactly. So for me, that was the hardest transition, was to come to a realization that I was stuck in time mentally. And for me, that was hard. That was really hard because.
Did somebody tell you this, or did you just see it on your own?
So for me, it was a combination of both. It was those individuals who I engage with, like my former brother-in-law, Ocelia, right? He was very knowledgeable. He had been in the system numerous times. So he kind of had this idea of like trying to mentor and help, guide me down the path. But it was also then me doing some introspection, those nights where I was late, when I was at home, when I'd get off work and lay at home, like I was just figuring like, how am I going to get ahead? Like, I just feel like I'm stuck, and how do I move ahead, and how do I advance without, feeling childish?
I actually found myself like being stuck, and I was never incarcerated. I'm just stuck. Like, I will still buy a pair of wheat Timbs. Like, this is from 94, 95. I will buy some shell toe Adidas. I will rock some Pumas. That's just where I am. I will rock a hoodie. Like, I will wear a bucket. Like, that's just who I am. So I don't know if it's necessarily something that stuck in time. It's like a comfort zone. If somebody says something to me about it, I don't think I'll be like, I need to go get me some skinny jeans and some distressed, distressed jeans.
Right.
I'm never going to.
When you get a rayon silk shirt, though.
You're right, but I will not. I will not go to the 90s of the silk shirt because, I don't think I can find one. And you were very disappointed when you was looking, I'm sure, because the
I was, man. I was. But that's the thing.
merry-go-round was closed. The
Yep.
oak tree was no longer around.
Yeah,
Shit.
Black Rock.
Hey, they tearing down Northridge now. Like it's completely, it's gone.
That's the first place I went to. I was like, oh man, let me go look. Oh man, ain't nothing over here, man.
Hey, that was Fashion Central.
Right. But that's the thing, though. But that's the thing is it's not. And for me, it was stuck because I tried to go back to only thing I knew. For 10 years, I wore a green jumpsuit, right? A green shirt and pants. So I just wanted to go back to the last thing that I know that I felt cool in. So yeah, I mean, I think for me that's just what it was. It wasn't necessarily comfort. It was just that's the last thing I knew. I didn't know anything. I know nothing about style.
Right. So even though you were trying to overcome these things and these challenges, did your time in prison affect family life and relationships with friends and family?
I think our bond became stronger between my mom and my dad. My story is very well known that my parents got divorced, and shortly after they split up is when I ended up going to prison. But I think for me, it was once I got out, it was trying to make up that lost time with them. My youngest sister, my youngest blood sister, she's about 18 months apart from me. Tanisha, I think it really affected her when I went to prison because she was 15, I was 17. So it really did some damage to her just because I was that consistent piece in our lives. Even when shit was crazy, it was me and her. But I think my friends, it's interesting, man. Most of the friends that I have are like from when I was 11 years old. When I started middle school, and most of them stuck by, they visit or they would send letters. So I don't think it really created a stress on friendships. More so, it just created distance between us, whereas we used to be super tight. And then obviously now 10 years later, people have had kids, they moved on, they've been married, well, so on and so forth. They moved to other state, so I think that was the strain to put on that. But I was able to quickly kind of, integrate with those friends who are still around, but then also make new friends.
So today marks your 20-year milestone. I'm sure it's a lot. I mean, right now, if you're talking, it's a lot of memories and a lot of stories that you kind of can reflect on. What does this day mean to you, and how do you feel when you reflect on the progress you've made so far?
For me, when I think back and I just kind of reflect over the 20 years, like, there's days where, even leading up to today, man, I get a little emotional, like thinking about it, because it was such a big part of my life. And I think for me, walking out of prison, I had no clue what I was going to do or where I was going to end up. Like, I just didn't know. I just knew I didn't want to go back to prison. So when I think back, like, and all the things that have happened over 20 years, it's crazy how much stuff has happened, good and bad, right? Nothing bad enough to put me back in prison, but just life happens. So I think it makes me feel I'm happy. I think that may be the most simplest of emotions that I have today, which is I'm just happy. I'm happy that I'm here. I'm happy that, I didn't make a decision that would have caused me to go back. And most importantly, I'm happy that the decisions I have made put me in a position to influence and support others to make sure they don't end up like I did. And to me, that makes it, this is crazy. It's going to sound really crazy, but it makes it all worth it. People have asked me many times, would you do it all over again? And I actually say yes, if I could do and learn the same things I did without creating victims and without being in prison, right? That's my caveat, right? Because I do feel like at the end of the day,
that prison part is a huge part.
It is. It's a big part of it, right? But that's the caveat, right? Like, yes, because I do feel like there's some things that really help shape me. But there's things there too that I still struggle with, and I still, because I was in prison during my formative years, I still struggle with those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably the hardest part about hearing your story, because I just think about what my experience was during the time that you were incarcerated. And like, those were some very, very crucial, critical years of my life that have made me who I am. And I guess looking back, everybody has those moments during the, I don't think it matters where you are in those times. It's still formidable regardless of what you're going through. You're going to learn something. So just because our situations were different doesn't mean it's better or worse. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess looking back, that you had that experience, and it probably hardened you and made you a lot more resilient. Whereas someone like me is kind of like, you know, times are so tough and so hard, and you're like, man, you don't know what hard it is, kind of thing.
Right.
In comparison. So your perseverance is a little bit different than mine. And you kind of answered the question regarding what you want people to take away from your story. But looking down the line in the future, what does the next 20 years look like for you? How does that fit into your goal in your life right now? And how's it working for you?
You know, it's funny because, and this is something I just thought about the other day. I was like, where did 20 years go? Like, I literally was sitting there thinking about the day when I got out of prison. And, you know, I've shared that story before, where when we got out of prison, my mom and dad picked me up. They were divorced at this point. Walmart, and I walked in the store and I couldn't figure out which deodorant I wanted. So just thinking back to that moment 20 years ago, like, I can't believe all that I was able to do in these past 20 years because of the 10 years I spent in prison. So I can't even believe that I had the ability to become a career executive in state government, the same state government that I was in prison in. I can't believe that I'm a nationally recognized expert and voice in the apprenticeship space. I can't believe that I'm a respected voice in the space of being system impacted. I can't believe that I've been able to do the things monetarily that I've been able to do after being in prison. So for me to think about what the next 20 years holds, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know. I don't know, right? I know that it's going up. I don't know where, but I think I'm at that point now where there is a big struggle for me, and I'm gonna be very transparent. It's a very big struggle for me, even though 20 years later of being released, it's really a big struggle for me to make decisions and to look at everything, whether it's my career, whether it's, you know, relocated to another state. That really wasn't a hard decision because we got a great deal, but it's tough for me to make those decisions. And that's rooted in the fact that when I was in prison, I didn't have to make those decisions. So now I'm at the point where I'm like, this pardon me thing, I love this. I love the camaraderie. I love the ability to tell stories. What does that look like? So I'm always thinking about the brand. Well, how can Pardon Me be better over the next 20 years? But to be honest, I just don't know. I don't know what I can do because I'm still surprised at what I have done.
I think if you put too much thought into it, because I don't know how much thought you put into it over the previous 20 years, but I mean, I know we're coming to a point where we're wrapping this up, but just, I want to make sure I say this before I forget. Like, the fact that you have accomplished the things you have accomplished in actually the short amount of time you've accomplished it, because it's not like what you've accomplished in 20 years is what people are doing in, you know, 35, 40 years. Like, even though you lost 10, it's almost like you accelerated your life to a certain extent by going through all the things you have done. And this is with all the shortcomings and all the obstacles you have to overcome to get there. Even to the point of you making this crazy move. Like, I call it crazy, not because it's a crazy decision, but it came out of nowhere. It's like, hey, yep, we got a house. We're moving Charlotte. Like, when? Wow. Like, you visited and all of a sudden you had a realtor, and then all of a sudden a moving truck, and then all of a sudden, look, you're here. Like, that's where you are. So the fact that you've done this and you, like you said, are nationally recognized, and you do not you're not apologizing for all the things that you've accomplished, and actually, I mean, the things that you've experienced, but then using them as accomplishments to talk to other people. I admire that, and I want to make sure you get your flowers right now. 20 years in, like, hey, congratulations on what you've done. And hey, I mean, inspiration is one thing, but you know, to be honored. I'm honored to be a part of Part Me. I'm honored to be a friend, and I'm honored to be a part of this journey with you because I probably should be tired of hearing the story, but I sit here and like listen to the story as if I never heard it before each time because obviously you give a different perspective. But hey, congratulations on 20 years.
No doubt.
20 years released, man. And
Can I just I want to get one word in too. I mean,
no,
definitely.
Go ahead, fire away. You got a question? Fire away, man.
Definitely congratulations. And not that I know a lot of people, but it's so weird that I know 4 people, yourself included, that have gone through what you guys have gone through and have come out to be extraordinary human beings. And these are stories that our community need to hear this, because we know that in our community, let alone probably my zip code, that probably hundreds of individuals that don't make it. They end up back in. And it's so important that your story gets out and more people hear this. Maybe I'm thinking big, but I think like this is something that could almost go on tour, and this is something that needs to be just shared with our community. And it's huge. And we joke and things like that, but you know, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of them. And this isn't like a small feat by any stretch of the imagination. And it just kind of speaks to your determination, your focus, and, you know, again, giving you your flowers now. But this is nothing short of extraordinary, to be quite honest.
You know, I think the thing is, man, you made a really good point. These stories need to be told, and that's what Pardon Me, like that's where this came from, right? You see it, it's right there. That's my pardon, right? I got that man. It's proudly displayed in my background. This is my professional background. That I'm on national webinars and national calls. That's in the video, right? Because that piece of paper, although not the most significant part of the past 20 years, that piece of paper give validity to the things that what I have been doing to improve my life to be better. But I think that's to your point, like telling these stories is so key. And that's what I'm hoping we can do with Pardon Me, is to continue to tell the stories. We have to tell the stories because so many people are walking around aimlessly out here after being released from prison. And many of them may have been out for 10, 15, 20, 25 years. And they've gotten stuck because they've never felt like they could do anything better than what they're doing.
Well, one of the things that you've done, I want to make sure. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want to make sure.
Go ahead.
You released the guilt and the shame of it happening, whereas I can see a weaker individual holding on to that guilt and shame and using that as the reason why they can't. So you're unapologetic about it, like, hey, that happened, but this is what I'm about to do, and ain't nobody gonna tell me otherwise. And if they do tell me otherwise, I'm gonna find a way.
You know what else it does too? It takes away that excuse that I pause because the excuse, it takes away that, you know, that piece of people saying, well, you didn't have to go through this. I had this, that. Like, you have eliminated that and like just jumped over that by leaps and bounds. And like I say, I know 4 of you who have. So it takes away people being able to use that.
Well, you know, it's crazy because, you know, I walk around, the first thing I say when I'm on stage, good morning, everybody. My name is Joshua Johnson, former inmate number 305178. I wear that badge. I wear that number, that former number, like a badge of honor, right? And I don't have it tattooed on me. But I mean, it's like, for me, because what I want you to understand is that's who I was. That's not who I am. And I think one of the most important parts of that acceptance is I take the power away from anyone who wants to judge me. My old boss said, he was like, hey, kid, we were walking in DC. He said, hey, kid, why do you tell people? Why are you so open about that you've been to prison? And I'll be honest, I don't care. If after I tell you that I've been to prison, you don't want to rock with me, that's your loss. I'm cool. I'm cool with the fact that you don't want to rock with me. I'm going to keep doing what I do. It's unfortunate, but I'm going to keep it moving. And I think that's where, for me, that's also the therapy part, right? The therapy part. So telling my story is therapy, but then also being unapologetic, like, no, wait a minute now. I'm being the voice for the voiceless. Because there's a lot of people who can't stand up in front of an audience. A lot of people who can't sit in front of a camera. There's a lot of people who've been to prison who can't tell their stories. So if I can get just one person to hear my story and to think differently about individuals who've been to prison, I've succeeded. I've succeeded if I fulfill my purpose in whatever the work that I'm doing. So that's why I become so unapologetic about it. You know, it really is. Like, you have to be strong about it, and it's a conviction. Like, man, hey, if you don't like it, what can I say? Like, I'm never going to apologize for what I did in the past, especially to somebody that I didn't do it to. Right now, if it was one of my victims, all day long, I'm going to apologize to the day I die to them because I took something from them. I took their sense of safety or whatever it was. But just any old regular Joe, I'm not apologizing to them for what? Now, I will say one of my biggest hangups, and my mentors have talked me through this, my focus has always been, I owe my community. I owe my community for what I took from it. And some of my mentors, one pulled me to the side and said, brother, you don't owe the community anything. You've paid your debt to society 1,000 times over. Worry about taking care of you and your family, and everything else will fall into place. Mm-hmm. And I think for me, that's key, understanding that and not feeling that I have to take care of the community, or I have to take care of a family, or not the family, but take care of my community. So it means I can't advance. But on the flip side of that guilt and shame, it never followed me. It's funny because I'm serious. I was just in Pennsylvania 2 weeks ago, and I was there for work during National Apprenticeship Week. And I was there to give a keynote speech about apprenticeship to a bunch of employers, workforce development folks. I only knew a couple people in the room. Now, most people professionally, they're going to go and have a conversation. Me being system impacted is not a part of my professional in an event like that. But what I immediately realized is the 150, 200 people in this audience really need to hear what I've been through, where I've come from, so they can understand why I'm telling them to engage with underrepresented populations for recruitment into apprenticeship. A lot of people would not do that. They would dance around it and they would become inauthentic. So they wouldn't be able to share the story and have people to be able to listen and accept it. People would start picking holes in it. So for me, man, it is totally unapologetic. I mean, you see, I rock my hoodies when I go through airports all across the country. You know, that's me at 18, 19 years old. You know, unapologetic. When people see it, they love it, and it opens a conversation. So I think for me, it helps. It's therapy for me, but then it's also, if I can just change that one mind about how individuals who've been to prison look, how they speak, what they do, then I'm a success.
One thing that I appreciate about that is actually in reference to a hip hop movie, 8 Mile, where the main character Eminem plays is B Rabbit, and he's constantly losing battles, and comes to the final battle and presents everything that the other battle rapper would have said to him. Call it the B Rabbit. Like, basically, you come to the table and, hey, this is what I am, this is what I am, and then now what? Now what you gonna say?
Man, you know, I went through that. Y'all know this personally. I went through that when I ran for school board in Germantown. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm out of Germantown, so it's some good people in Germantown, but it's a crappy town. It really is. Like, there's people there who are absolutely horrible. And I share that story. I've talked about that, right? Yeah. Like, and it was crazy because they literally did on social media, they put out this urgent alert about me being a convicted felon and having a criminal charge and going to prison, right? Do you know what my response to them was? First of all, I'm not a convicted felon anymore. I did receive a governor's pardon. But secondly, Google is your best friend. All you gotta do is Google my name. And when you Google my name, Joshua Johnson, Wisconsin, you're gonna see all kind of news articles. You're gonna see all the things I've done. But one of the things you're definitely gonna see in there is me talking about going to prison. Like I wear that. I talk about it. That's my story. So people, you're right. Like B Rabbit, he like, yo, I'm about to say all the things that y'all think y'all gonna get me on. In my mind, that's exactly what I'm doing. Is I take the power away from somebody to try to judge me based on my past.
Mm-hmm.
That past is not who I am, and it's not who I am today, and it's not who I will be. That was a moment in time, and that's what it was. It's gone.
Well, like we said, congratulations, 20 years. I mean, obviously the incarceration was life altering. But you've absolutely shown resilience, and you've reflected on a lot of these experiences, and like that individual said, paid your debt to society, and you deserve and should expect the opportunities that you have moving forward. And that's not a message that should be taken by anybody who has gone through the same thing. You should expect, given the opportunity, the same opportunities you have been given as well. So.
Yeah, you know, and I think it's really important, man. One thing I really want to highlight, man, is I think the fear that has been instilled in us as a society around individuals who've been to prison, that fear we have to get rid of that fear. And I'm hoping that the little work that I do, this little bitty work I do with Pardon Me and speaking across the country, can really help to drive that conversation and to drive the fact that we can create change. And, you know, if there was one piece of advice that I leave for folks as we wrap up is, if you come in contact, even at your job, if it's your family member, don't pass judgment on somebody just because of what you heard they've done, just because of what you know they've done. Have a conversation, be an influence. One of the hardest things for people that have been to prison to do is to talk about being in prison, because they're instantly going to be judged. And they're instantly going to be put into this bucket of the worst people in the world. Like there are people that I know that refer to themselves as pieces of shit because they've been to prison. And I have to tell them that's false. But that's the mentality that they're getting when they come out of prison, or that's the mentality of what they feel. And they really feel like that. And what you say and how you feel is who you become. So for those of you out there listening to the show, those that rock with us at Pardon Me, let's take time out. Let's take a second. Let's give some grace to individuals who've made mistakes. Let's give some grace to individuals who are trying to change their lives and put themselves in a better position so they don't create any more victims. That's my hope. My hope is that if we can do that, now we can start to make more people feel more comfortable when they're getting out of prison, and helping them share their story, and having them go into the schools or go into the community centers or go down and talk to individuals and make them understand you don't have to commit crime. You don't have to go down this path. So really, like, don't listen to all the rumors, like listen to all the foolishness, like take time out. We're not dangerous. I'm not. I ain't gonna do nothing. I'm more likely willing to help you and protect you than I am to commit a crime to you. You know, and I think we have to continue to get that out there. We have to continue to get that message out there, you know, for folks so that they can feel comfortable with engaging individuals who've been to prison.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us all the way from Charlotte and sharing your story once again, and also thank the incognito brother Poindexter, the Podfather, for popping in on camera. One of the rare moments you'll ever see his face on camera. And hey, be on the lookout for 2025 as Pardon Me continues to actually dive into these stories of individuals who have been incarcerated and tell their stories of how they have become members, reacclimated to members of society as a pardoned individual from being incarcerated.
No doubt. No doubt, man. I want to thank y'all. You know, you give me flowers, but I want to thank y'all for being a part of this journey, for taking the time out to be a part of this journey. This journey means a lot to me. It means a whole hell of a lot to me. And I really appreciate y'all time and effort that you put into this. Folks that are watching this, they have no clue the work that goes on behind scenes, behind closed doors, like trying to get this out to be a good product that we've done for the past almost 2 years to really try and get this out to be a product that it can really be influential and inspirational for folks. So we definitely look for any feedback that you have, for any content that you love for us to continue to throw out there. But thank you, Tommy. You know, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate you, brothers, for rocking with me on this. And those other brothers out there, Dominic, L, like so many other brothers, Fat Boy Fresh, like really appreciate them for rocking with me. And I got to make sure I give a shout out to the most important person that rocks with Pardon Me, and that's my wife. You know, she's gone into this. She's came into this when we got married. She obviously knew I was a convicted felon. I wasn't pardoned yet, but it means so much to have folks that are rocking with me. And my goal is to continue to make y'all proud. Because if I know I make y'all proud, then I'm going to continue to make myself proud. So for those of you listening, please feel free to reach out, book us for your next event. PardonMe22.com to get out and hear the story in full instead of this 45-minute clip. But we really looking forward to 2025. And I'll be honest, man. I'm looking forward to celebrating. I don't know what I'm gonna do tonight to celebrate. I might have to open up one of my bottles that, you know, that is that's forbidden and go on and take a little sip to celebrate this 20 years. But you know, I definitely want to be around my family and kids to make sure, you know, to really celebrate the fact that it's been a great 20 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 20 years. So thank you, fellas, again for rocking with me. Shout out to our sponsor, Be Clear Madi. Thank you again, brother, as always. Thank you each and every one of you all who rock with Pardon Me. Follow us on all socials. Be sure to download every episode. We're on all streaming platforms. I want each and every one of you to remember, failure is never an option. Peace.
For more information about specific pardon requirements and eligibility in your state, visit PardonMe22.com and search under the Pardon Resources tab.
The mission of Pardon Me is to inform, motivate, and most importantly, humanize individuals who have made mistakes but have received gubernatorial and presidential pardons. Pardon Me is a brand for those who support second chances.